In the beginning, there was silence. Not the kind that follows a whisper, but the profound stillness that exists before the shaping of thought itself. Terraria was a formless cradle of untapped potential, floating adrift in the shadowed tides of the cosmos. It was a land unclaimed by order, unsullied by chaos. Here, time slept, and nothing dared stir its slumber. But from the void, a tremor echoed. A single pulse, a breath perhaps, rippled across the stillness, and in its wake came life, raw and unshaped. The elements, earth, fire, water, and air emerged as primal forces, dancing and colliding like the dreams of gods not yet born. These were not yet beings, not yet creatures, but instincts carved in energy. And from their endless collision rose the first land masses of Terraria. Forests crept across hills, ancient and untamed. Oceans boiled, not from heat, but from the sheer will of existence. Mountains pierced the sky, crowned by lightning and crowned again by stars. And in the places where element met element in violent harmony, the biomes were born. Each a breath of Terraria's evolving so, but no world may remain unclaimed for long. The balance of primal chaos called forth its first stewards, beings of immense will, each a whisper of intention in a world still dreaming. These were the ancients, titans in form, though unseen by mortal eye. They were neither gods nor mortals, but the manifestation of Terraria's burgeoning sentience. And one of them created the Dryad and the Lizard Men, born of root and stone, flame and stream. The Dryads did not speak as mortals do. Their will was sung in wind and whispered through bark. They wove balance with unseen hands, nurturing harmony between fire and bloom, storm and soil. Next, we must speak of the Lizard tribe, ancient, elusive, and half-forgotten. Long before the surface knew the touch of man or the spread of grasslands, in a time when the world was still young and the stone still warm from creation, there walked upon the deep earth a race not born of mere nature. They were the Lizard, half beast, half warrior, and wholly devoted. Forged in secrecy beneath the roots of the first jungles, their temples were not homes, but sanctuaries. They lived not merely as animals, but as thinkers, architects of fire and rune. They spoke in a tongue older than the winds, and though no surface tongue can capture it, it is said that even silence bent to listen. They had faith, not in gods of mercy or war, but in the sun eternal, blazing, merciless, divine. To them, the sun was no celestial body, but a living will, a judge of purity. In its light, they bathed. In its wrath, they burned and called it sacred. And for an age, Terraria knew peace. Yet peace is but a pause in a greater song. From beyond the veil of reality came the stirrings of hunger, a consciousness vast and unknowable. It did not create, only consume. And where the Dryads sought to preserve, this entity sought to devour. It had no name at first, only hunger, but in time, that hunger would take form. A god of endless eyes, of tendrils unmeasured. A name would be given by those who dared speak it. Chtulhu. The Lizards, ancient custodians of solar knowledge, sensed the celestial invasion before it broke upon the land. Guided by their high priests, they withdrew into the jungle and carved a sanctuary of stone and flame, the Lizard Temple. There they constructed the golem, a being of pure solar might, shaped from the bones of the mountain and kindled by sunlight caged in crystal. It was not made to win. It was made to resist. Among the relics of the Lizards was the solar tablet, a relic capable of calling forth the eclipse, a state in which the veil between Terraria and the void thinned, empowering all things eldritch. The lizard sages, foreseeing its danger, destroyed the artifact, scattering its shards into the molten heart of the world. Without it, Cthulhu's dominion would remain limited, but in sealing the eclipse, they severed their own hope of divine intervention. The sun would no longer answer. While the lizards built walls of stone, the dryads took to war. No army, no steel, only life. They called upon vines to strangle the skies, roots to impel invaders, and winds to carry poisoned spores. And in their defiance, they confronted Cthulhu himself. In a terrible battle, they severed the god's limbs, his brain, torn from his skull by binding roots, his eyes ripped from their sockets and sealed in crystal prisms, his spine shattered by a quake sung into the ground. But gods do not die as mortals do. They scatter, and with each lost Terraria grew darker. Only one dryad lived to see the silence after. She has not spoken since. Chtulhu, broken and blind, fled into the void, but not before leaving scars. The lands twisted, corruption seeped into the soil, and the skies no longer sang. Humanity retreated, fractured. The lizards sealed their temples, and the dryad became myth. The body of the Moon Lord was gone, but its hunger remained. The story passed in whispers that once the peoples of Terraria stood together and felled a god. But gods do not die easily. The Moon Lord's fragments stirred, and the madness he brought never fully left. It festered in dark places, in cults and caverns, waiting for the world to forget. But the dryad remembers, and in her silence, the land waits once more for the second coming of the moon. In the wake of the war against Chtulhu, as silence fell upon Terraria, something older than memory stirred beneath the soil. The corruption, an ancient blight, not created but awakened, was born from the rot of ambition, the hunger of mortals, and the arrogance of gods. It was not evil, not in the way mortals understood evil. It was simply hunger, purity inverted, life unbound. The land it touched grew purple and hollow, teeming with chasms and aberrations, as though the earth itself had begun to remember a darker time. The crimson was not born from ambition, but from emotion, rage, obsession, sorrow. It festered in the hidden places of Terraria, a pulsating mass of blood and sinew, as if the planet itself had grown a heart, and then failed to contain it. Where it spread, reason vanished. Creatures once meek became ravenous. Trees bled. Skies wept crimson rain. Unlike the corruption's cold calculation, the crimson was alive, terrifyingly alive. To counterbalance the spreading plague, the world manifested the hallow. But it was no paradise. It was order so absolute, it broke the soul. The hallow glittered with pastel brilliance, but beneath the beauty lurked a merciless instinct, a light that burned impurities without question, and purity defined only by perfection. The hallow was balance, yes, but balance enforced, not offered. It did not coexist, it replaced. Now Terraria is divided between three eternal forces: the corruption's decay, the crimson's flesh, and the hallow's purity. Each seeks dominion. None offers peace. Together they war in silence, reshaping the world from the shadows. And amid this trinity of contagions walks the player, a fragment of mortality caught in the storm of cosmic consequences. A sect of humans was established, forged with a singular and unyielding purpose: to seal away the Moon Lord for eternity. Among the many members was one figure who would come to play a darker role in the unfolding of fate: Lunatic Cultist. Lunatic, initially a devoted member, wore a moonlit blue robe reflecting his enigmatic nature. However, unknown to the others, his mind was already turning darker. During one of his expedition, Lunatic traveled with a group, but it was here, amidst their journey through the Crimson, that the true horror awaited. The Crimson, with its maddening allure, ensnared them all, infecting their minds with its insidious influence. The Crimson consumed the souls of his companions, leaving Lunatic the sole survivor, now a puppet to its will, twisted and corrupted by the Hive. The Crimson, a place teeming with malignant whispers and terrible temptation, seduced Lunatic into abandoning his oath. It was within its cursed embrace that Lunatic gave up his identity, choosing to merge with the Hive, losing himself entirely in the process. His former self, bound by the teachings of the Order, was lost forever, replaced by a vessel for the Crimson's dark power. It is said that, with his will shattered and his mind claimed, Lunatic sought the revival of the Moon Lord, not of his own volition, but because of the whispers that now haunted his every thought. Driven by the Hive's influence, he kidnapped Mechanic, a brilliant mind of the world, and imprisoned her deep within a dungeon hidden from the eyes of others. With cold cruelty, Lunatic forced her to forge the pieces necessary for the resurrection of the Moon Lord, the skull, spine, eyes, and brain. Lunatic's actions, though seemingly his own, were driven by the insidious forces of the Crimson. His mind, no longer his own, had been reshaped into a puppet of the Hive. The whispers, the seduction of power, they were the strings by which he was controlled. His betrayal was not one of calculated ambition, but of the slow and tragic erosion of his will. The transformation of Lunatic from a noble ally to a servant of darkness marked the beginning of a new age of despair. The Moon Lord, once sealed away, was now on the verge of being resurrected, and with it, an age of chaos would descend upon the world. As Mechanic labored in her prison, the fate of the world hung in the balance. The resurrection of the Moon Lord would bring about a storm unlike any before, and yet, even though betrayed and fractured, the remnants of the Order would continue their fight. They would not let the Moon Lord return, even if the cost was their lives. The battle to prevent the resurrection of the Moon Lord had only just begun. To ensure that none would dare tread the path toward the dungeon, the lunatic cultist wove a curse, a cruel ancient malediction, upon a man once known as Clothier. Once a humble tailor of no great renown, he was seized and bound not by chains of iron, but by chains of will. The cultist, now more shadow than man, branded the soul of Clothier with a sacred geas, commanding his spirit to linger and his body to endure. From that moment onward, the tailor became warden, his flesh little more than a husk animated by command, his memories of freedom buried beneath the weight of compulsion. He was condemned to stand eternally before the gate of the dungeon, his gaze hollow, his voice silent, and his purpose singular, to guard the threshold to the cursed depths, lest any mortal fool tempt fate by entering unbidden. For within those vaults lay secrets not meant to see the sun. Far to the west, beneath the warm light of day and behind a welcoming smile, another pawn moved into place. The Guide, so he was called. Few remembered who he had once been or what name he bore before the curse, for now he lived bound to a grotesque fate, a symbiotic tether between his soul and a forgotten horror known only as the Wall of Flesh. In life, he offered counsel, guidance, the illusion of kinship, but in death he opened the gate. The cultist had seen it in dreams, visions carved into his mind by the Crimson Hive, a figure not yet born into this world, one who would arrive clad in light and blood, with destiny wound tightly around their throat like a noose, a stranger to the land, yet bound to it. And so the Guide waited, smiling, watching, teaching, and when the time came he would die by the hand of that very soul, and in doing so he would tear open the world, birthing a second calamity. Thus, the dungeon was sealed not with walls nor locks, but with men, each cursed, each placed like pieces upon a game board carved from rot and prophecy. Their suffering was the gate, their continued existence the key, and above all of this, the lunatic watched, his mind fragmented by crimson, his will no longer his own, awaiting the moment when destiny would stir again, and the Moon Lord's heart would begin to beat once more. When a new Terraria world is born, it is not born from nothing. It is merely another turning of the wheel, an echo of a design long buried beneath blood and ruin, the illusion of creation, the hope of a beginning. These are but the tools of a will unseen, a mind fractured and yet precise. For each new world, each spark of life, is a calculated ripple in the grand tapestry of the lunatic cultist, the mad architect who watches from behind the veil of stars, his soul entwined with the hive that whispers in scarlet. And so, the player arrives. No name, no past, a stranger washed ashore in a land both vibrant and dying. But they are no ordinary soul. Each one is the vessel that was foreseen. Each one, unknowingly, carries the potential that the cultist has waited for across countless lifetimes and shattered realms. At their side, always, appears the guide. A man draped in familiarity, voice warm, manner kind. He offers wisdom, survival tips, a path forward. Yet his presence is no accident. He is the seed, the bait, the first anchor. Bound by a curse more ancient than his own name, the guide's soul is stitched to something far beneath the world. A thing with no eyes, only flesh, a wall that dreams of waking. As the hero sets out, innocence cloaked in iron and curiosity, they tread across plains and forests, caverns and skies. But eventually, they find it. The Red Land, crimson. It pulses. The trees here do not merely sway, they watch. Their bark bulges with pupil-like growths, unblinking. The ground beneath crunches with the texture of teeth, and the air is thick with a scent not of rot, but of something alive. The creatures here, if they can be called such, move not as individuals but as limbs of a larger unseen beast. Their motions synchronized, their cries discordant yet united. Something beneath this biome breathes, and it calls. Driven by valor, or perhaps by something deeper, the player presses on. They find a cavern gaping in the earth like a wound. Its walls are lined with flesh, its floor soft and wet like tongue. Deeper still, they find the hearts, pulsing, waiting, wrapped in walls not of stone, but of living matter. Each is protected, entombed in a prison impervious to blade and flame. But the player is clever. A well-placed explosive is all it takes. The heart ruptures. Something screams. A chill surges through the player's spine, and yet, from the viscera spills treasure. Powerful, beautiful, alien, the mind wavers, greed overrides fear. Another heart must be broken. And then comes the brain of Chtulhu, it is called in whispered scriptures. A mass of thought and madness, it descends upon the player in shrieks and illusions. It is battled and, by miracle or by fate, defeated. Yet its death is not final. No true horror dies so easily. It simply withdraws, for now. Encouraged, emboldened, the player continues their silent war. The eye falls, then the spine. Piece by piece the forgotten god is stirred from his slumber, and far above the lunatic cultist watches. He begins to move his pawns. Deep in the hellfire wastes of the underworld, they bind the guide's soul to a doll. Not one doll, but many, tied by thread and bone to the feet of the demons that fly the inferno's edge. Should the player slay one unknowingly, The doll fell into the molten lava. The guide will die, and in death his curse will unravel. The wall of flesh will rise. The boundaries between light and night will fracture. The soul of night, the soul of light, cosmic essences locked within the world, will be set free once more, and with them the final seals that hold back oblivion shall weaken. The cultist does not act in haste. He has waited for ages, and now the vessel awakens. The hero walks the path, but it is not their own. When the wall of flesh fell, the world shuddered, this time in fear. He was no tyrant, no monster shackled in flesh. He was the guardian, forged by the will of the world itself, a living threshold that stood between order and chaos. His destruction did not herald salvation, but crisis. And so the world, ancient and instinctive, reached inward. In the wake of his death, an ancient defense mechanism, dormant through eons, was triggered. From the deep veins of the underworld, two primal forces were set free, the spirits of light and of night. They rose, clawing through bedrock and time, seeking to reshape the world in the absence of its fallen shield. The soul of light, brilliant and absolute, carved their way toward the surface. Their arrival marked the birth of a biome unlike any other, the Hallow, a radiant strip of land stretching skyward like a wound of purity. But it bore no compassion. It did not protect. It judged. And in its judgment, all things impure were to be purged without mercy. Otherwise, the souls of lights were corrupted as they passed through the crimson lands. Their path did not remain pure. Along the way, they encountered crimson rot, a festering domain where blood had memory and the earth itself pulsed like a wounded heart. Here, a grotesque convergence occurred, for among the blackened veins of the crimson, stray souls of light drifted, beacons torn from their celestial course by the gravity of corruption. And where purity met plague, the result was neither sanctified nor cleansed. The souls of light, in their brilliance, did not purge the crimson. They were devoured by it. Subsumed into flesh and instinct, they ignited a transformation, a divine fever, not of holiness, but of exalted madness, and souls of night was born. So the beasts of the crimson changed. Once mindless and vile, they now burned with a radiant fury, driven not only by hunger, but by an unnatural zeal. Their eyes shimmered with pale flame. Their muscles tore and reformed, empowered by stolen grace. The rot did not abate. It transcended. This was no longer a mere infection. It had become a doctrine of blood and light, a blasphemous fusion where corrupted nature had tasted divinity and refused to relinquish it. But the consequences of the world's activation did not end with the landscape alone. Deep within the ruined depths of the dungeon lay shells, not corpses, not creatures. They were unfinished vessels, machines, built not to conquer, but to replace. Crafted long ago by mechanics' hands, tools meant to replace the shattered fragments of Moonlord's broken body, the skull, the spine, the eye. Yet, when the spirits surged forth, souls without purpose, without shape, they found the hollow machines, and like fire to dry hay, they took root. Thus were born the mechs. No longer dormant, these reconstructed titans awoke, not as tools, but as possessed horrors. The twins, reborn in torment. The destroyer, a writhing monument to artificial sin. Skeletron Prime, the iron-fanged tyrant of a forgotten order. They did not remember their purpose. They only knew instinct and the echo of the spirits that now steered them. The player was caught off guard, but not unready. With skill tempered by pain and reflexes shaped by 1,000 deaths, they fought back, steel to steel, flame to flame. One by one, the mechs fell. Hollow again, their souls dispersed into dust. But beneath the canopy of the jungle, something else had begun to stir. There, buried in stone and wrapped in vines older than memory, Plantera opened her eyes. She was a key, organic, sacred, and bound by oath to sleep until the threats of the old world had passed. Now, with the mechs destroyed and the echo of Moonlord's touch diminished, she awakened. A battle ensued, a duel of blade and bloom, of man against root, of intruder against sentinel, and in the end, nature yielded. Yet the rhythm of the world did not calm, for what came next, extremely terrible. From the corpse of the guardian bloomed a key, ancient and wrought with patterns older than any script. It was not merely a tool, but a testament, one final trust left behind by a long-forgotten pact. The player, now bearer of the jungle's legacy, turned his gaze toward the Lizard Temple, whose gates had slept untouched for 5 long centuries. The structure, half swallowed by vines and obscured by the canopy of time. It was there, beneath the stone temple, that he sought the cultists, servants of forgotten God, worshippers of madness and moon. But within the first chamber, he found no robed heretics, only silence, and eyes watching from the dark. The Lakesards, a race ancient, emerged from the temple shadows, verdant-scaled, their eyes not with hatred, but with fear. They spoke no tongue, player knew, but their blades made their intentions clear. You was not welcome. To the player, they were guardians of evil, shielding some buried monstrosity. But to the lizards, he was the herald of apocalypse, a vessel sent by Moonlord himself, come to shatter the last hope of the world. That hope was a golem, a titanic relic forged in solar flame, entombed in the heart of the temple. For centuries it had slept beneath golden stone, its purpose singular, to expel the moon and sever the gaze of the outer god. And now, the player had come to destroy it. Driven by his own fragmented understanding, player forced his way through the temple. Deadly traps fell like iron rain. Walls shifted, sealing behind him. The Lizards fell one by one, brave but doomed. None could halt your march. Until, at last, beneath the sun-engraved sanctum, the solar golem awakened. Forged of ancient sunbrick and bound in radiant chains, it rose like a miniature star, its core pulsing with solar wrath, a relic of defiance, a prayer in stone. And so they fought. Ignorance against intention, the last guardian, defeated at the hands of the self-proclaimed hero. And with the fall of the golem, the temple became extremely empty. Yet, amid the quiet of victory, the hero felt a tremor, not in the earth, but in the soul. He had fought bravely, felled monstrosities and titans alike, but a foul stillness pressed upon the world, as if something watched, waited. The player made his way to the dungeon, where cold stone whispered. The gate stood still, but the air pulsed with energy older than language. There, cloaked in lunar blue and crowned with madness, awaited the lunatic cultist. He did not strike immediately. He spoke. You think yourself a savior, a slayer of beasts. You are a knife in my hand. Every guardian you have slain was not an enemy, but a keeper, a chain, a prayer, and you. You are the harbinger of the end. And in that moment, the hero understood. His journey, painted in valor, was drenched in blood not of villains, but of guardian. He had not freed the world. He had disarmed it. The cultist raised his hands to the sky. The ancient tablet shattered in a surge of light and screaming winds. Its fragments did not scatter. They entered him. His body bent backward in agony and ecstasy, becoming more than mortal. A demigod, now bearing the essence of the 4 pillars. A duel ignited beneath the blue moon, a false prophet and a deceived hero. Blade clashed with starfire. The air split as the cultist wielded power not meant for flesh, but the hero, no longer a pawn, struck true. Not with vengeance, but with resolve. When the cultist fell, the sky cracked open. The 4 pillars descended. Solar pillar. The land itself ignited, soil charred black, and spires of flame erupted skyward. Worms of magma danced like serpents across the heavens. The sun screamed. Stardust pillar. A cradle of birth and death. Insects of astral matter bred infinitely, their wings glinting like shattered starlight. Life, unbound and uninvited. Nebula pillar. A sky of lilac fog and dripping stars. Thoughts no longer belonged to their keepers. Mind-eaters floated silently, probing, hungering, whispering lies shaped like memories. Vortex pillar. The horizon fractured into war. Gunfire, lasers, and lightning clashed in an endless hailstorm. No heaven, only battlefield. The world groaned. The seal was broken. The Moon Lord, long exiled, now stirred beneath the veil. The player stood at the edge of annihilation, knowing the truth. To destroy the pillars would release a god, but his grip on the blade did not waver. "Let him come," he whispered. "If a god stands in my path, I will make him dead." And so, once more, the hero walked. Beneath skies shattered, across lands scarred by his own hand. Not to undo his sin, but to face it. And at last, the final pillar fell. The heavens, once torn by war and flame, now stood still. But it was not peace that followed. The warrior, scarred, wearied, yet unbroken, tightened his grip upon the blade that had carried him through carnage and delight. He closed his eyes. Then came the sound. Not merely a tremor through air, but a resonance deeper than any mortal ear could hold. It echoed through sinew and soul, through the blood of crimson and the bones of the world. Something had awakened. Lightning lacerated the sky. Clouds churned like dying world in mourning. The air thickened. Soul bled from the earth, and even light itself grew shiver. The hero's vision dimmed, and in that blindness came clarity. "If I can no longer see," he whispered, "then I shall not need to see." He sat, cross-legged, closed his eyes, atop the home he had built with his own hands, a sanctuary forged between battles, a place where time once stood still. There he waited, for fate, for the end. And from the void, it came, emerging like truth from silence. The Moon Lord, an inevitability. He spoke no words, for he had none. His will was not to be explained, only imposed. One hand rose toward the sky, the other toward the earth. He sought to unmake them both, but the player rose too. He did not shout, he did not curse the god. He simply drew his blade and with the beat of ethereal wings surged skyward, to meet apocalypse head-on. The battle was not a duel, it was annihilation made manifest. 1,000 eyes opened across the heavens. Lasers like judgments rained down. Reality folded in upon itself. But still, he pressed on, his wings tattered, his armor cracked, his body a torch in a hurricane. And when the final blow landed, the Moon Lord shattered. He's not fury, because he does not know anger. Blood rain falls on the ground. Then came dawn. The crimson withered, its flesh dissolved into wind and ash. The world sighed in relief. And in the forests now cleansed, the last of the dryads stood still beneath sunlight she had not seen in centuries. Her mission was complete. Yet the player did not linger. He sheathed the blade that had sung with every heartbeat of his tale, lifted it once more upon his shoulder, and began to walk. For peace is not a destination, only an interval, and the journey will never end.
Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Don't forget to leave a comment to let me know if you like this type of content. Bye, guys. Have a nice day or good night if you listen to this to sleep.